Alright guys, it's Chatterbox Reviews, coming at you guys with my review for Stranger Things Season 3, Episode 6. Alright, so I'm making my way through the season here, finishing up Season 3. So I did watch this episode, I believe a few days ago actually, and I'm just getting around to the review now. I'm behind on a couple reviews here because I was away on vacation, but anyways, regardless, we're coming down to this episode, and I'm really looking forward to the last two episodes. I've heard the finale is just amazing, and so I'm really looking forward to that. I'm really pushing myself to get to that point. This season has just been, I think it was the slow start that really kind of took me out of it. And I never really planned, to be fair, on, watching all these in one night type of thing, right? I planned on these reviews taking 2, maybe 3 weeks on the channel because I like to take my time through things. And I watch a lot of other shows at the same time. So it's tough for me to just take a whole day where I don't watch any of those and I just watch one in being this show. Anyways, with all that being said, love to hear your guys' thoughts on this episode and the series if you've already watched through it. And love to hear your guys' thoughts on this season as well and how it compares to the other two, because that is a big debate going on right now. Is this season the best one? Again, I said this last review, I'm not ready to make that claim. At this point, I think I am ready to say it's better than Season 2 for me. But, whether it's better than Season 1 remains to be seen. I thought Season 1 was really, really great. So, anyways, if you enjoyed the review, please like and consider subscribing to the channel. Would really appreciate that as well. But without any further ado, let's get into a little bit of a recap and some of my more notable thoughts of the episode, and then we'll get to my rating, favorite character, and some more overall thoughts and predictions as to what we might see in the ending of this season. Alright, so we start right where we left off, essentially, as the creature chases down Nancy into an empty room in the hospital. We see it throw her against the wall. This is just a really eerie sequence here. We see before she gets into this empty room, she's kind of trapped in there, and she's got the door closed. She locks the door, and then all of a sudden this creature just starts oozing through the door, right? It's like a shape-shifting thing almost, because it essentially decomposes, breaks down into those guts, and those guts can seep through anything, right? And it seeps through the under thing of the door, and then, the little kind of the little metal in the door at the bottom, too. And so all of a sudden, this creature's just inside the room. Meanwhile, the door's locked, and Jonathan can't even get in, right? So I really like the way this went down. Very, very eerie, very unnerving. You know what I mean? It's just a really great sequence. So, throws her against the wall, and just before it looks like it's about to kill her, thank God, 11 shows up. So, 11 and the kids, of course, at the end of last episode, saw the lights flickering. Will gets that feeling in the back of his neck, and all of a sudden, he tells them he's here. You know what I mean? Like the mind flayer's here. And so they go up to help. 11 and the kids arrive, help Jonathan open the door. 11, of course, just opens the door with her mind right away. 11 then beats up on this creature, it looks like, as she throws it against the walls and the ceiling, and then back to the ground, and then eventually sends this thing out of the window of this hospital, and they're up on, I think the 10th floor or something, or 6th floor or something like that. So just throws this thing out the window, where eventually then it falls down onto the ground, where we then see later, as the kids kind of make their way down there, they run down to see where this monster has went, if it's still there. And so then we watch it kind of decompose into those guts again, very similar to the fact that the way that it came into Nancy's room there through the door. It breaks down into those guts, and we see these guts kind of seep through the sewer grate there on the ground, and then eventually we then see it make that journey towards the bigger monster, right, that's living under that building where Billy and Heather have been this whole time. And so we see it travel through the sewer system to get there, and eventually then attach itself to that monster. So it's almost like this monster is calling back that, creature, or that, I guess because it came from the two hosts, right? It came from Heather's dad and the Nancy Drew guy, as I refer to him as, right? So it basically is calling home more of these guts, more of these building blocks, if you will, to kind of make itself bigger. And it kind of accepts defeat too, right? Because it's not big enough to take down 11. 11 is able to easily kind of beat up on it and get the better of it. So Billy then says to Heather, It is time as he watches the guts kind of connect onto this big monster, and maybe now the creature is big enough to take on 11, and that's kind of the thought that they put in us, at the very beginning here, and at the end, this thing breaks out, and we know it most likely now is at full strength thanks to all these hosts. So in order to get him to talk, we got to Hopper and Joyce's part of the episode here. So in order to get him to, and that was a really great intro, by the way, then the intro theme plays, a really great way to start off the episode. So in order to get him to talk, Hopper buys Alexi a Burger King meal and a Slurpee, which ends up being strawberry instead of cherry. It ends up being the wrong flavor. So we see Hopper kind of get very angry, right? Get very angry at Alexi, just kind of lose his patience, as he has this entire season. Which has definitely been a questionable move by the writers, because he really wasn't like this in the previous 2 seasons, but I digress. Anyway, so he gets really angry with Alexi and basically just throws him out, right? Throws him out into the driveway of this guy's, house, if you can call it that, right? Throws him out to the driveway, gives him the keys, right? And he's given the chance to leave, essentially, right? Like, he gives him the keys, he tells Alexi to go get his own Slurpee, and at this point, he can just take the car and drive away. Right? He's fine. He can just drive away, right? But it turns out that he doesn't leave. He gets to the gate with the car and decides to reverse, takes keys and throws them to Hopper. So Hopper ends up being right after all, that he is, not ready to leave. For whatever reason, as we learn, he's probably more scared of the Russians than he is of them, and so he's going to stay with them for now, right? Wherever he's the safest, or the least in danger, right? So they learn then, of course, yeah, like I said, he's more afraid of the Russians than them. So, with translating help from our conspiracy guy, who I think he does have a name, but I forget it. Anyways, conspiracy guy seems fitting. Joyce and Hop finally figure out what Alexei and the Russians are basically doing there in Hawkins, and what they're trying to do, of course, that we've kind of pieced together already ourselves, is trying to open the gate to the Upside Down once again. But in order to do so, they had to come to Hawkins, where the gate had been opened before, and it was still healing, or at least that's kind of the word that Alexei uses. And so we also get the idea here too that Alexei says it didn't work for them in Russia, since that part of the gate, right, that location hadn't been opened before. So that is why, basically, that they had to come to Hawkins. They were in the wrong location in Russia, and they weren't able to make it work. And so that also, I like that explanation, because that makes a lot of sense why they would come to Hawkins and not just stay in Russia and unleash these, beasts on the world in their own country. Why they would have to come here. And the reason is that gate has been open, and it's still a little weak. You know what I mean? So they still have a little bit of a chance to get that open. Again, right? So this means, they do have a real chance at opening it if they can get this drilling device or machine, right? They get this powerful machine ready, and they piece it together, as we kind of are led to believe that Alexei was able to do now that they are in Hawkins. So really, obviously there's very shocking to Hopper and Joyce. They piece it together very quickly, and then Hopper thinks there must be a way of turning this key, as Alexei refers to it, or this device, off and stopping them from opening the gate again, right? Because Joyce and Hopper know this is going to be bad. If they open this gate again, that's, they spent all of season 2 trying to close this thing, and now it's going to be open again. And Joyce recognized right away that her kids are in danger. Her kids, and then also Hopper's kid in 11, right? They're all in danger now that they're trying to open the gate. And so she tries contacting them as well. Anyways, so this is Hopper's thought. Well, there must be a way in stopping the key. But Alexei tells him he knows how to do it, but because he is compromised now, he could never get back into the facility in order to actually turn it off. Which, that also explains why he was out kind of looking for parts with this other guy, right? And he wasn't there at the facility helping the people piece it together, right? So obviously I think what happened is they're kind of using his technology, or his, writings, if you will, to do it. And then they didn't really need him anymore, right? So they just got to send him out. And now he has been compromised by being taken with Hopper, and they would never trust him again, right? So Hopper offers, though, to smuggle him in, and Alexei says breaking in would be impossible, right? He says it would be impossible to break in and get me back in there. Although Hopper's set on it, right? And we've seen him do some crazy things before. So I'm thinking, not for Hopper, it's not, right? It's not possible to see Hopper do it. But we'll have to see what happens with that. That's kind of where we leave it off. And then later at the very end of the episode, we see them then heading back to Hawkins after calling in somebody to bring their men. And I think this is the Doctor from season 2, who, of course, would still have that influence on the basically the Navy, if you will, like, the cavalry, I think Steve refers to them as, right? The army guys, right? The soldiers. And so he is, I think, contacting that guy to bring those soldiers to obviously fight off these Russians, and try to, pretty much break up their plans of opening the gate again. So some really interesting stuff there. They're heading back to Hawkins, which, why didn't they do that before, right? Like, why did they just do that immediately the minute that they heard the Russians were trying to open the gate? I don't know. It took them a few minutes to piece it together, but now they go from Illinois back to Indiana to Hawkins, and obviously try to rescue their children at the same time, right? Because now they're in danger as well. So some really great stuff with Hopper and Joyce. And Alexi as well. Just some charming moments there. And Joyce really was a standout as well in her limited time as well in that sequence. Sorry. All right. So then we see Steve and Robin are captured at the beginning by the Russians. However, Dustin and Erica are able to get away. And again, I really like the Steve, Dustin, Erica, and Robin parts in the entire season, but especially the last 3 episodes, they've been kind of keeping these all plots kind of separate, from one another, and this one has been one of my favorites, the kind of Scoops Ahoy plot line, if you will. Anyways, and so Dustin and Erica are able to get away at the very beginning, and essentially Steve tells them to go back above ground and get help. Right, because he knows that Dustin and Erica aren't going to be able to, pry them from the Russians later on, and so they're going to need some help. So basically, Robin and Steve sacrifice themselves in order for Dustin and Erica to get away. And eventually then we see at the end of the episode, or near the end of the episode, that they come in to rescue Robin and Steve after they've been beaten up and almost about to be tortured, right? They almost are starting to cut off Steve's nails. They even drug both of them in order to talk more freely about things, which kind of works. Steve actually reveals Dustin's name, reveals Hopper's name, throws a couple things out there. Even Robin kind of makes fun of them, says that they received their broadcast and that's how they knew about them. So they do tell them a little bit of information, but not much, or at least not what the Russians were necessarily looking for. And really what they were looking for just didn't exist. I mean, there really isn't a big grand conspiracy. These kids kind of figured it out almost accidentally, and then actually, went in the elevator room and somehow find themselves down there, right? And the Russians are kind of, blown away that that's even possible, right at this point. So, anyways, so they're almost tortured, but Dustin and Erica come in and save the day. We see Dustin electrocute the doctor as he comes in. All the soldiers are kind of distracted. They go off. And he electrocutes the doctor who's still in that room. He says, "Get ready to run," to Steve and Robin at that point. And of course, they're still both drugged. Steve's been beaten up pretty badly, so they are now going to be on the run from the Russians. And then we see the Russian soldiers essentially see the distraction. Right? They all go over to that spot, and they see the fuel liquid that Dustin and Erica used to help burn a hole in the floor of this place, the floor of the facility. They use this liquid to burn through. And I think to myself, I'm like, the ultimate distraction, right? Like, really great job here with Dustin and Erica piecing that together. I gotta say, I really like the parts with Steve and Robin. The Dustin and Erica parts, the "You're a Nerd," one of my favorite scenes, I think, of the season so far. A really charming scene, and a good way to slow things down a little bit, right? Everything was kind of, really heightened. The pace was really fast. And then they slowed it down. And that's the way I think they should go forward in slowing things down a little bit. Less of that kind of tropey, kind of cliche stuff as we saw with Steve and Robin as they were laying on the floor. They're about to die. We see that in every show, every movie, right? And I'd like to think that we didn't see those type of things in season 1, but maybe I got to rewatch it now again. But to me, that's, I think, the main difference between season 1 and I mean, this season, but also season 2. I mean, ever since season 1, they've kind of gone the cliche and tropey route for some of these things, and that's the one problem I had with the Steve and Robin dynamic in the episode, and that's what I felt like Dustin and Erica's little sequence there, they actually didn't do that, right? It was kind of original, charming, unique. I really like that, play, and I think both actors for Erica and Dustin, respectively, are doing a great job as well. So then we get to kind of the main plot of this one. So those are kind of the mini little things sprinkled in there with the other subplots with the Russians and Starcourt, and then of course Hopper and Lexi and Joyce. But now we get to the kids. So as the kids regroup from the hospital, sequence, I guess, or kind of the scare, I guess, at the hospital. Nancy almost dies. Jonathan almost dies. So 11 decides to go back in the Upside Down to find where Billy is. And meanwhile, Mike then is worried about her overworking her powers and overexerting herself. We see that she's been in there for quite a while looking for Billy. We see the mound of bloody Kleenexes or tissues on the floor. And it's like, wow, like she's been at this for a long time. She's, constantly wiping her nose for that blood. And we see Mike is just kind of worried for her, and Max and him get into an argument about it. And then finally Mike admits that he is in love with her and just wants the best for her. I thought this was a nice, charming moment. Again, Finn Wolfhard doing an awesome job, in his performance here as well. And this kind of makes sense. I mean, we knew that he's in love with her, and we know it's probably, mutual on both ways. And he also confronts Max here a little bit too, in trying to divide the two of them. And I thought that was a really interesting part too, as well. So anyways, just a kind of charming moment that he's really worried about 11, and he admits that he loves her to everybody else. So then 11 comes out of the room just on time. I think she missed the part where he said he loved her. But anyways, so she comes out, announces that she found Billy in his bedroom, which they agree it's a trap, right? They all agree that bedroom, if they go there, is a trap to basically get them all in one place. And then, everyone's going to come, right? And we saw this in season 2 and season 1, right? The demo dogs were all coming towards Will when he was the host and all that stuff. So we've seen this before, and they know what it is. They know it's a trap. So instead, they decide that they need to find the source of where the people are being flayed and being where the monster is basically rising, right? I guess they don't know that it's a monster quite yet, but they know that something is happening there. They need to find that epicenter where everything's going on. They need to find the source. So in order to do so, 11 must look into Billy's mind, just as she did with her mom in season 2, where she was able to find those events, the rainbow, 3 to the right, 2 to the left, and all that stuff, and kind of discover a little bit more of her past and childhood, and what her mom went through. And she did that by looking into her mind. So hopefully she's kind of hoping that she will be able to do that same thing with Billy when she connects with him. And it doesn't go so well, let's just say that. Or maybe it does, but it also brings on some consequences. So, and also by looking into his mind, this will tell her where the source is, because he's been there before, obviously, right? But she doesn't really, she's not prepared for all the things that come with it, right? The mom showed her what she wanted her to see in that way, and Billy, he's being controlled by the mind flare, right? Like, Billy's mind is essentially the mind flare, and so that's a huge problem already. And so 11's going in there, and even Mike says, be careful. She says, he can't hurt me in there, right? But, it really is kind of a risk she's taking here, with the knowledge that the mind flare has already taken Billy over. And it is interesting too, because we haven't seen the real Billy, or even know where he is right now. Is he like Heather and he's like trapped in this other dimension in the bathtub, like we saw earlier? I'm not sure. Anyways, so she goes into the dimension and touches him. He plays dumb for a few moments, and I kind of had the feeling, right, that he's just acting right now, right? And then he suddenly, really great jump scare here. He looks up at her and grabs her arm really tight, as if he knew she was there the whole time. And obviously the mind flare is able to see her in that other dimension, right? This is, the same way that she kind of woke up the Demogorgon, right? She touched him. Well, the Demogorgon could see her in that dimension, you know what I mean? But a regular Billy could not. And this just reaffirms the idea that the Mind Flayer's already taken over his mind. So then we see that Billy releases her arm after, kind of holding on to it for a few minutes there, or a few moments, sorry, and releases her and she falls. Now, very similar to the way Heather fell, kind of in the water, falling down, even though it's just a level surface. Anyway, so she falls down, and during this fall, she starts to see these moments play out of how things started for Billy with the Mind Flayer, right? And him, being taken down the staircase and, crashing the car and all that stuff. So she sees little images of the monster too, down in kind of the basement, I guess, of that building, right? And so she's able to see these kind of very little glimpses and moments here as she's falling down. And then suddenly she wakes up on a beach. So she's sent down to this beach inside one of Billy's memories. And this is one of his memories as a kid. He's going surfing and his mom's looking on at the beach in California. And so then this leads her then to a massive black cloud where she believes will tell her where the source is located. And I thought this was a really great just imagery and visuals here of kind of this moment and how Billy's mind works. Like, she almost gets into Billy's mind and is able to see those memories, but then sees this kind of black cloud, and that seems like that's the Mind Flayer part of his brain right now, or the part of his mind, and the rest of it is still himself and still these little memories that he's able to access. So I thought it just really kind of set up some big things, just visually wise as well. And so in this black cloud, and we see the kind of red lightning. Of course, we've seen this before with Will going into that other dimension. And so as 11 goes into that cloud, she sees more of Billy's memories until finally she sees his car parked outside of the Steelworks building. The source, right? So this is the location that they've been looking for, the one that we've known all along, right? And finally the kids figure it out, right? Finally, 11 is able to see this place, and some of the Billy's memories as well were, pretty dark, right? We see his kind of upbringing, and we also understand a little bit more about him, you know what I mean? And kind of what has happened in his lifetime to influence him to be the way he is. And so I thought those were, I'm not going to talk about them in depth, but those were, important parts to this as well, in seeing why he is the way he is. A lot of people hate him. He's kind of an antagonist, but you definitely understand a little bit more of where he's coming from. But we also were led to believe this, like, already. You know what I mean? Like, in season 2, I think we saw as well the way that he, in the very end, in the finale episode, we saw the way his kind of dad treated him and the way that interaction was. And so that wasn't anything surprising. Anyways, so 11 finds out the Steelworks building, and she tells the others. We see Jonathan find the address in the phone book, and then Mike tells her to get out. Right? Get out. They have all the information they need, and just get out, right? Take your blindfold off and come back. So, all is good and well, and then suddenly, 11 is brought back out of this memory vision, right? She's kind of, and it's almost like in reverse. It's almost like a rewind, right? Like she's coming out of this fall again and seeing those same memories that she saw when she was falling as well, right? So then she tries taking off her blindfold as Billy, grabs her arm again. So she tries taking off the blindfold, only to find Billy. She's still in the other dimension. She calls for Mike. He doesn't answer. Nobody's there in the room anymore. This is a really, really shocking scene here, the way this plays out. So now Billy enters the room. He says, he can't hear you, right? And so he tells her, you shouldn't have looked for me because now I can see you. We can all see you. He says, you let us in, and now you're going to have to let us stay. Really great stuff, and this is accompanied by, of course, visuals kind of overlaying a little bit of a recap, if you will, of how she let them in season 1 with kind of the first contact of the Demogorgon, right? Letting him in, and then, trying to keep them out in season 2, and now he's saying, you gotta let us stay. right? You are not going to close that gate again. You are going to let us stay in this world, and you let us in. Now you're going to let us stay. Thought that was a really impactful line, and I also thought this was cool too, where he says, "You shouldn't have looked for me because now I can see you. We can all see you." Again, pulling back to that point of all these hosts are really just one. You know what I mean? Like they're all part of the same body, the same brain of that mind flare, and they can all see her now. They can all see where she is. And so this is very similar to the way that Will played out in season 2, where he was a spy, right? And so now it sounds like at least that 11 is really kind of like a spy. They can see her and see where she is now and see what they are planning. Which obviously will have some big consequences for how they tackle this. So then we watch several of the people in the town. It looks like they're having a fair for the 4th of July. And so a bunch of these people suddenly just start walking away. So they start walking almost lifelessly, it looks like, away from the parties and away from the get-togethers. Some of the people are like, "Where are you going?" Right? And all of a sudden, they just kind of snap into it, into this kind of trance, and just walk lifelessly towards the steelworks building. And to me, it really seemed like the mind flayer is just calling them home once and for all, as we see. Just really, really crazy stuff. Again, kind of an unnerving few visuals there of just seeing these people walk lifelessly towards the steelworks building. No reaction at all. They're just walking straight there. Really crazy. Then we see Billy affirms, "Don't you see all this time we've been building it for you? And now it's time to end it. It's time to end you, your friends, and then everyone." Wow, right? Wow. So a really impactful line here again. And he says, "Don't you see all this time we've been building it for you?" And that's interesting too, because that means that the Mind Flayer knows how powerful 11 is, and now he's been building this whole time to get big enough to then face her and, in his way, beat her, finally, right? Because she got the best of them in season 1 and 2 in the past events, and now he's getting bigger and stronger than ever in order to beat her, right? To get the better of her. And I thought that was really cool that they've been building all of this whole time for her, to beat her, with that sole focus in mind. And of course, she is shocked. We see her in tears at this point, just blown away by what Billy is telling her and what we've known the whole time. But obviously, the kids have not understood really the overall just breadth of what's been happening so far this season. So 11 takes off her blindfold, comes back, and then we watch as the people walk towards the monster there in the basement of that steelworks building, and they quickly explode. I mean, they get in front of this monster and they just explode, just deteriorate into these red guts that then eventually connect to the monster at its kind of feet, it looked like, and these guts are making it bigger and stronger with each person that goes through until it finally breaks through the grate, basically in the floor on the ground there. It breaks through the grate and is now up on the ground in the shape of that Mind Flayer figure that we were really got familiar with in season 2. In the way that Will drew him on that piece of paper. We got the kind of visual of him in that season. And so now he is in that shape and form of the Mind Flayer, only in, a real physical body. And is he now at full strength? Probably, right? Like now he's at full strength and now he is ready to take on 11, who he's been building up towards this whole time. So a really crazy end of the episode as it breaks through the gate, the grate, I should say, at the building and is now coming for the town of Hawkins. All right, so in terms of rating for this episode, I'm going to give this one a 4.5 out of 5. I think the pace is really picking up now. The season started slow, but it's really finishing strong. Episode 5, 6, and I would assume that 7 and 8 are really fast-paced. A lot of action happening in those ones as well, really action-packed. So, I have heard some complaints about the pacing at the very beginning, starting off pretty slow. We don't really get a lot, or we kind of don't sink our teeth into anything until about episode 3, I would say, of this season. Whereas, as I've said before, season 1 and 2, they kind of got into it right away. I mean, the title of episode 1 in season 1 is The Vanishing of Will Byers. Like, he goes missing in episode 1. And in this episode, we kind of get caught up with the kids, see what's going on in the town, set up these relationships, right? And then we get into it. So it's definitely a different approach, but I think it's really working out because it looks like it's going to be finishing very, very strong and a lot of action in the last couple episodes here. So I will say, in this episode again, I feel like they're having trouble achieving this balance between paying homage to those classic, horror films and horror tropes that they like to follow throughout the series, but they also, this balance is paying homage, but then avoiding using kind of too many, right? Like, you still want to have some original, some uniqueness to your story and the overall writing of the season, and the scenes in which these characters are kind of interacting with each other and the way these dynamics are. And I just feel like they're having trouble achieving that correct balance, between those two. And it feels like they're using the cliches and tropes too much, especially in parts of this episode. Again, it just felt a little more cliche than what it did in season 1, at least for me. And I feel like that's one of the biggest weaknesses of the last 2 seasons, where to me, I felt like in season 2 especially, the pace picked up, the big fight scene happened at the end, but they kind of forgot the regular character stuff, like the charming stuff that so many people love about the show that really jump-started it in season 1. And so to me, it's just a little bit frustrating to see the writing still not at that peak point that they could be at, or at least that they were at in season 1. And I will say, too, this season it seems like they're getting away, or at least kind of splitting up the kids in this season, and I feel like that's overall just a negative thing. I wish they would have kept them together. Obviously, keeping Dustin with the group would have been better. Bring Steve, bring Robin, maybe even Erica and Lucas could have a little banter, but I just feel like splitting up the kids this season is, and I shouldn't say maybe a negative, it's just different, you know what I mean? And to me, I would like it more if all the kids are together, all accomplishing, and beating out this evil, instead of these kind of sprinkled in plot lines all around. And again, season 1 was really kind of that close-knit group, with Dustin, Lucas, Will, being gone, and Mike, right? And then 11 came in. So, and then you get Hopper and Joyce kind of helping out. We get them into the story as well. And in this season, you have like all these different plot lines all around each other, which again, I feel like is definitely entertaining, adds a little bit more maybe enjoyment to the series, and adds some variation. But to me, I would like to see all the kids together, and that's something that they haven't done this season so far. But obviously, the last 2 episodes will most likely bring all of them together, and they'll all be probably fighting this evil there at Starcourt Mall. So there you go. Favorite character for this one is Joyce Byers, played by Winona Ryder. She's doing an amazing job, and I thought I'd highlight her for this episode. She had some really great stuff in there. Limited screen time. She didn't have a lot, but I really liked her scene with, was it the conspiracy guy, right? It was a conspiracy guy thing. Basically, yelling at him, to get going, right? And try to help translate with Alexi and all that stuff. I thought that was a really great scene there as well. And then just her back and forth with Hopper. David Harbour and her have developed such a great chemistry on screen that they just really, really do a great job at showing that on the screen. And those characters, that dynamic between the two, really great. The relationship between the two, I'm not sure that it's quite like her and Bob, obviously, last season, but it's a different kind of relationship, and I really like it for sure. So anyways, guys, that'll just about do it for my review of this episode. Thank you guys so much for watching this one, and as always, love to hear your guys' thoughts of this episode, but also the season in general and how it compares to the other. Would really like to discuss this one with you guys. But anyways, thanks again for watching this one, and we'll see you next time for Stranger Things Season 3, Episode 7.